Welcome to Mapping SQLite Databases in XAMN. My name is Chris Currier. I'm a technical trainer with MSAB, and I'll be guiding you through how to do this in XAMN, primarily for unsupported applications that use the SQLite database to store information. How can we add that information into XAMN when it wasn't decoded, when the app was not supported by XRY? So the application I chose for this demonstration is Life 360. So knowing that I'm dealing with the Life 360 app on both iOS and Android devices, I go open up the device manual for XRY, and I click on Apps, and I type in Life 360. And I don't get any hits. There is no support currently with XRY for Life 360. If it did have support, for instance, if I had just typed in Kick, then you can see that there is a level of support. So here is our drug phone. As you can see, there are some data sets here, and I can show the subcategories, and we can see that there are a lot of files that were captured. So I'm going to go ahead and start with View All Artifacts. And now I am going to go ahead and just type in a search for the word Coke, and you can see that there is nothing coming up here. So we know that the drug dealers were talking on an app called Life 360, which we saw did not have support. So I do a search for Life 360, and I am getting some hits. I am seeing some file paths here for media. I am seeing some database hits as well. And if I go to chat, I can see an invite code for Life 360. So this is good information for me to go ahead and flag or tag as important. But I'm not finding anything on Coke, and not really finding any Life 360 messages here. So what I want to do is I want to know how that data is stored with the application. And if it's stored on the device, typically that data may be typically that data, if it's on the device, may be stored in a SQLite database or an XML or an Apple property list file. So I'm going to start with the databases, and I'm going to sort by file name. And doing some research, I found that there was a messaging database, or maybe you just look through the entire Life 360 folder and finally came across the messaging database. Let's see here. So here is the messaging database. Now looking over on the right, I can see the file path, and that's the path for all the Life 360 app data there as well. So I can go right to that path, I can go to that media path, and I can start tearing those apart and looking for information. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this button right here to show this or launch it in a new tab. Now, good, this gives me more room. I can look at the thread participants, I can open these up, and I can see some good information here. Alright, I look at the high numbers. So I want to start to see where are these numbers the biggest, and if you want to show deleted, remember to hit show deleted rows, and that way when you click on something you can see all of the deleted data. And there doesn't seem to be much here with names. Looks like a lot of other stuff, so I'm going to ignore it right here for the participant. But you know what, if there were deleted messages, I want to see that and see if there's anything good. So what happens when I click on the message table here? Well, I can see a record number, a deleted record, an ID, a client ID, thread ID, and a sender ID. Okay. And then I can expand those columns, scroll over, and here I can see the messages. Now, I could export this out to a CSV file, but really that's only going to be helpful if I want to use maybe a Python script with the CSV file, or if I want to but I could do a Python script with a SQLite database. Or if I want to use the Control F function, because I can't Control F right here, but I can do something better. And that is I can map this data manually. So if you click on this little button right here to manually map, first thing it's going to ask you is what category do you want these artifacts going into? And right now I'm dealing with the messages. And I do want the deleted one, so I've got the deleted rows selected. I want to drop down the select artifact category. I've got calls, contacts, location data, and this app does store location data, so I may want to come back and map out the location data, but I'm going to do messages chat to start with. We're going to go after this database. We know that there's chat here, so I'm going to go ahead and click next. And now what you do is you simply take a look at the column headers and find the ones that you want. Now hopefully you've already got an idea and you've noted down which ones you want and what they are. So deleted record, that's fine. That one's going to be true or false, it's deleted or not. And then we have an ID. I'm going to ignore that for now. We have a client ID. We have a thread ID. I'm choosing to ignore these. But you know what? The thread ID could be important. So I'm going to drop down, and here you manually select the option that fits best. Now there are limited options here, and so please let us know if you think of any options. We've already submitted some, but contact support and let us know if you can think of one that maybe we missed as you start looking and using this with certain apps. So thread ID fits here, so I'm going to use that one, and it becomes highlighted. Sender ID. Now sender ID, maybe it could be a name or something like that. So it could be from, but it's asking for a name. So I'm just going to leave it as from right now, unless I find something better down here. Then we have, I'm going to ignore that type, and then we get to content. Alright, that's good. That's going to be the text. So this is going to bring in this data into XAMN so that we can search, we can filter on the data, and do our finds. And now we go over to the next one. It's a timestamp. So let's go down and let's see what we have options for time. Well, the first one is an Apple timestamp, 2001. Those typically begin with a 4, 5, or 6. I don't see a 4 there. I see a 1. So if I click on this one right here, seconds since 1970, or maybe it's milliseconds. Well, one of the things you need to know is that seconds is 10 digits and milliseconds is 13. So if you count this up, you will count 10 digits here. So it is seconds and not milliseconds since January 1, 1970. This is an epoch time. Starts from counting seconds from a date and time in history. And I start looking, and I see that there's some other information here, like the location information I just mentioned, but I'm going to pass on that for now. If there was location data, then I would come back and grab it as location artifacts. I don't see anything else going across, so I'm quite happy with just the ones that I did. My main goal is to get those text messages, get the date and time, get the message thread, and if I've identified the sender or receiver in the process, that's excellent. So now all you have to do is, once you have your column headers all done, so I've got these right here highlighted, now all I have to do is click on next, and it gives you a preview of what this is going to look like, and it tells you how many artifacts are going to be imported. So I'm going to go ahead and click on import, and you get this message that comes up that 135 artifacts have been added. To see the created artifacts, we're going to end up closing these tabs, and I'll show you why in a second, and then starting back from the file or from the case tab and going in that way and opening up a new XAMN tab. To save, it's very important that once you've imported these, if you want to save these into this extraction, you need to come up here and click on this floppy disk to save these changes. So I'm going to click OK for right now, And just to show you that this didn't take effect with my open tabs, if I come in here and type in Coke, I get nothing. So nothing seemed to happen. So if I go back to my case or file tab, depending on how you open this up, now if I click View All Artifacts, and I type in the word, and don't forget you'd want to save this, right? Hit the floppy disk and save. Now if I type in Coke, I get some hits, and you can see that there's a little person profile here to show that this was manually added. So now I can tag these as important, or better yet, I can select all three of these and I can create a new tag or add a new tag, and I'm going to call it drugs. So I'm going to add the drug tag because they're obviously talking about Coke, and we have other information that leads us to believe they're talking about cocaine and not the soda. You can also add an examiner note to all three at the same time. If you didn't know you can do that now, you can. You can also add a timestamp, so make sure the time on your computer is correct. And asking for Coke. Okay, so I've added that, and now it's going to import into the examiner notes the date, time, and the message. So all three of them got it. I no longer have to just do one at a time. I can select, multi-select, and add it for the ones that are selected. So we know Coke is there. Great. So now if I add a filter and I go to my examiner map data, I can see that I've just manually mapped the messages. And I've got the text from the message, the time, the message, the thread ID, and the name. Okay, so you're going to want to check the timestamp and just confirm that this is UTC-0. Okay. All right, so here are the messages. Now, I've got a name, but I don't know who this is. So now what you're going to want to do is go back to that messaging database and go through and finish your job. So I'm just going to do messaging. And I'm going to go to the databases. And here's the messaging database. I'm going to confirm this is the one for the Life 360. Open it up in a new tab. And if you remember our process, I'm not going to show deleted rows because there was obviously a lot there. On a normal case, would I? Yes. So here we have the thread participant, but I'm just going to make this easier. Here's my thread ID, my participant ID, and my name. So if we take a look at the actual messages, if I go back down here, clear my filter, and go to the manually mapped ones, if I click on it, I can see this name right here of 8809. If I go in here, I can see 8809 7C79. So I want the participant ID and I want the participant name. Okay, so now I can go ahead and, if you guys remember, all I have to do is come down here. You could export as a CSV, but instead I'm going to manually map. So I'm going to click on this icon right here. We are dealing with contacts, so I'm going to hit drop down, select contacts. Now the next step after you select the category is click on next, and you just go through and choose the categories that you want. We have a thread ID, but unfortunately under contacts we don't have an option for the thread ID here. So you could choose something else. I'd like to see a text one at least, so that way you could set up text, and you can use these more than once. Now the participant ID, I'm going to show that as the display name. So if you guys remember, the participant ID is what we pulled out from the actual message that we found. And then we have the participant name, so I'm going to show that as the name. Then the next step, we click on next. We display what we've got. That looks good to me. I'm now going to click on import. Here is our little box telling us what we have to do. I click OK. And now if you remember, I'm going to have to close out of these. I could leave this one open and just open up a new one, but I'm just going to close out Now I'm going to go to view all artifacts, add the filter. So we come down here, examiner map data, add that filter. I have 139 artifacts. So here is the message, here is the name, and now if I go all the way down to the bottom here, or if I go to contacts, I can actually see these names. Now if we go back to our information here, if I were to copy this database, if I were to copy this information, clear the filter, go back up, and now I can paste this in, do a search, and if I wanted just messages in chat, I can do that. So now I have all these messages, but I also have a contact, so I'm going to do a thumbtack, and that way now I can see this person is Carl. Alright, so I have all these conversations between these two as far as where it involves Carl, and now I can tag them as important or tag them as drugs. So now I can go through and do the same thing with the other ones and just tag them all, and now I can go ahead after I'm done tagging it, make sure I save my work. I can then also clear the filter, and I can go down to my tags, multi-select with that thumbtack, and now I can export out to a report, sort however you want, and go from there. So I just took an unsupported application, Life 360, found the database with the data that I wanted, and again, remember, there may be other databases in there to do this with, or you may go back multiple times and I want to get that location data. I want to get those attachment links for the pictures. So that is how you can quickly map this SQLite data within XAMN. Don't forget to save your work. I hope you enjoyed the video, and from all of us at MSAB, stay healthy, stay safe, and thank you.